Why America's greatest stadium can't be saved. The building nobody can agree on. This is the Houston Astrodome. It was once called the eighth wonder of the world. It invented AstroTurf. It sheltered 25,000 Hurricane Katrina evacuees when New Orleans went underwater. It held a generation of Houston's civic identity under one roof. And it has been locked, dark, and untouched for 15 years. Not because it's falling apart, but because nobody can agree on what to do with it. In this video, we're going to look at how it got built, why it got abandoned, and exactly what is making it so impossibly difficult to save, because the answer is stranger than you'd expect. Section 1. The city that refused to sweat. Houston, 1960. To understand why this building exists, you need to understand Houston in 1960. This was a city in the middle of a serious boom. NASA had just set up its manned spacecraft center outside town. Oil money was everywhere. The population was exploding. And Houston had just landed a Major League Baseball franchise, the Colt 45s, who you probably know today as the Astros. Houston was trying to prove itself, and it had a very specific problem standing in the way. Houston's summers are brutal in a way that's hard to fully appreciate until you've experienced one. Temperatures past 95 degrees, air so thick with humidity, it sits on you like a wet blanket before you even reach your seat. And the mosquitoes during evening games weren't just annoying. They were becoming a genuine public health concern. Players and fans were getting eaten alive. The mayor at the time, Roy Hoffhines, concluded that most of the people around him were considered genuinely insane. If nature won't cooperate, you bring the outdoors inside. You build a structure so large that it contains its own weather. Nobody had ever done that before. And Hoffhines didn't just want a roof, he wanted a full, clear span dome. 642 feet across with 0 interior columns, covering a baseball field that demanded a footprint of 710 feet. The engineers told him it had never been done at that scale. His response was essentially, "That's your problem. Figure it out." What they built was extraordinary, but it came with a problem nobody saw coming, and the solution to that problem accidentally changed American sports forever. Section 2. The Eighth Wonder. Opening night, 1965. What they built was a steel lattice dome lined with 4,596 translucent lucite skylight panels. At the time it opened, it was the largest clear span structure ever built on Earth. No columns, full sight lines from every single seat, and the air conditioning. I want to dwell on this for a second because it's kind of absurd. The system moved 2 million cubic feet of air every single minute. The equipment required its own separate building just to house it. That's enough airflow to cycle through the equivalent of an Olympic swimming pool's worth of air in under 3 seconds. Roy Hoffhines called it the eighth wonder of the world, and honestly, people agreed. On opening night, April 9th, 1965, President Lyndon Johnson was in the stands for an exhibition game between the Astros and the Yankees. People drove from across Texas just to walk inside and look up at the ceiling. Elvis Presley performed here. Judy Garland performed here. Evel Knievel jumped his motorcycle over 13 cars 2 nights in a row in 1971. In January 1968, a college basketball game between Houston and UCLA drew over 52,000 fans, widely considered the first nationally televised primetime college basketball game in American history. This wasn't just a stadium, it was a destination, a thing you went to see even if you didn't care about the game. And then the glare problem happened. Those 4,596 skylight panels that made the building look so spectacular, they created a catastrophic glare during daytime games. The geometric pattern of the roof reflected sunlight directly across the outfield. Fielders tracking fly balls were essentially running blind. In the very first exhibition game, 5 of the first 7 runs scored came from balls the players simply could not see. The fix was obvious: paint the skylights. The glare disappeared, but without direct sunlight reaching the field, the natural grass began to yellow, then brown, then die completely. By the end of the first season, the Houston Astros were playing on spray-painted concrete, so engineers spent months developing a solution, a surface that looked like grass, performed like grass, required no sunlight and no water to survive. What they invented is now in virtually every high school football field, every college stadium, and every major sports complex in America. They called it AstroTurf, named directly after the building where sheer desperation forced the idea into existence. For 25 years after that, the Astrodome delivered everything it promised. But a design that was revolutionary in 1965 was quietly becoming a financial liability, and the building had no idea. Section 3. The years it worked. 3 decades under one roof. Starting in 1968, the Houston Oilers brought professional football to the Astrodome. The Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo grew into one of the largest events of its kind in the world, held year after year right there under that dome. Concerts, demolition derbies, circuses, boxing matches. And here's the thing I want you to hold on to, because it matters for everything that comes later. If you grew up in Houston during this era, you almost certainly have a memory inside this building. Astros games with your family on a summer evening, the rodeo every spring, a concert your parents took you to when you were 8 years old, and the scale of the place made your jaw drop. These were generational experiences tied to a single roof on the south side of the city. The Astrodome wasn't just a sports venue, it was the physical address of Houston's civic identity for 3 decades. Section 4. The design that became a liability. Structurally sound, financially obsolete. By the early 1990s, something had shifted. The same circular design that had made the Astrodome revolutionary was becoming its greatest problem. Here's why. A circular stadium built to serve both baseball and football is, by nature, a compromise. For baseball, a third of the seats sit at awkward angles to the field. For football, the circular shape pushes the end zone fans far from the action. Neither group is getting a great experience. Meanwhile, cities across the country were building a new generation of stadiums, sport-specific, optimized down to the last sightline, packed with luxury suites and premium club seating. That revenue had become essential to how NFL and MLB franchises funded themselves. The Astrodome had almost none of it. Structurally solid, historically remarkable, financially obsolete, the Houston Oilers demanded a new publicly funded stadium. The city said no. The owner moved the franchise to Tennessee after the 1996 season. The Houston Astros made the same demand, a new baseball-only park with a retractable roof, or they would leave. The city agreed at that time. The Astros moved to a new downtown ballpark for the 2000 season. The eighth wonder of the world had no tenants. And right next door, Houston lost something else. Astroworld, a beloved theme park that had drawn Houston families for 37 years, closed in 2005 and was demolished the following year. That lot has sat empty ever since. Houston already knew what demolition grief looked like before the Astrodome fight even started. Section 5. The weeks it mattered most. Then came August 2005. Hurricane Katrina made landfall on the Gulf Coast and destroyed New Orleans. Within hours, the levees broke, and more than 80% of the city was underwater. Houston opened the Astrodome. Over 4 days, approximately 25,000 displaced people arrived. Cots covered the playing field. Medical stations were set up across the concourses. Volunteers came from across the state. For several weeks, a building that had been largely dark for years became the most important facility in America. It was exactly what Roy Hofheinz had always believed a building like this could be. A structure so large, so resilient, so fundamentally useful that when the worst happened, it could absorb it. The evacuees were eventually relocated. The lights went back off. In 2008, the Houston Fire Marshal declared the Astrodome non-compliant with fire safety codes. By 2009, the doors were chained shut, the power was cut to minimum levels, and the building was formally abandoned. The building that had sheltered a city had no one left to shelter. And here is where the story stops being about sports and starts being about something much more uncomfortable. Because this is not a story about a building that failed. It's a story about a city that can't decide what to do with one that didn't. Section 6, the trap. $55 million versus $752 million. Let's talk about the numbers because they're what make this genuinely difficult. It cost $55 million to demolish the Astrodome. That's not cheap, but it's manageable for a county the size of Harris County. Getting the building to basic habitable condition cost $752 million. And I want to be precise about what that figure covers. Plumbing, electrical, HVAC, and fire safety systems only. That number excludes design upgrades, historic preservation work, and any modern venue features. It is purely the baseline cost of making the building legally safe to enter, before a single seat is installed, before a single event is booked, before a single dollar of revenue comes in. And here's where it gets really complicated. In 2014, the Astrodome was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Then in January 2017, the Texas Historical Commission voted unanimously to designate it a state antiquities landmark, placing it in the same legal category as the Alamo in the Texas state capitol. Under that designation, Harris County cannot demolish or significantly alter the structure without going through the Texas Historical Commission. The building's own historical significance is the very thing making its salvation harder to achieve. Over the past 15 years, dozens of proposals have been floated and collapsed. A luxury hotel, a movie production studio, an indoor amusement park, a convention center expansion. Each one ran into the wall of cost, politics, or both. In November 2013, voters rejected a $217 million bond proposal that would have converted the Astrodome into a multi-purpose event facility. That was the most realistic plan anyone had put forward in years. It failed at the ballot box. Then, in November 2024, architecture firm Gensler, working with the nonprofit Astrodome Conservancy, unveiled the most detailed plan yet, revised to an estimated $840 million. The proposal envisions a new arena at the building's core, surrounded by hotel space, offices, restaurants, and a pedestrian boulevard running through the center of the dome, connecting it to the rest of Energy Park. The Conservancy has cited up to $400 million in potential historic tax credits to help close the funding gap. The revenue logic is there on paper, but none of it moves forward until the building first reaches that $752 million baseline. Before a single design element gets built, the building has to be safe to enter. And even then, even if you cleared that hurdle, the Gensler plan still doesn't have the support of Rodeo Houston or the Houston Texans. Those are the two tenants whose buy-in any redevelopment of NRG Park actually requires. Without them, the economics don't work. The Astrodome sits directly in the shadow of NRG Stadium, the $352 million facility built in 2002 that replaced it. They share the same parking lots. One fills every NFL Sunday. The other is used for storage. Section 7. What this is really about. A monument to American paralysis? This is not a monument to failure. The Astrodome worked. It worked for 25 years. It invented AstroTurf. It hosted a president on opening night and sheltered 25,000 people when the Gulf Coast fell apart. Roy Hofheinz was right. It was the eighth wonder of the world. What it's a monument to is a specific kind of American paralysis. The ability to build remarkable things combined with no framework for deciding what to do with them when they outlive their original purpose. Harris County owns the Astrodome outright. There's no debt on the building. The structure is physically intact. It's not falling. It is not going anywhere. And as of today, no decision has been made. I think two genuinely defensible positions exist here, and I want to be honest about both of them. You can argue that demolition is the responsible call. Accept the loss. Free the land. Use the $55 million wisely and build something the city actually needs right now. Sometimes the right answer is to let go, and there's no shame in that. But you can also argue that spending public money to preserve a building that physically held Houston's identity for 60 years, that sheltered 25,000 people when New Orleans was underwater, is exactly what civic investment is for. Some things are worth the cost, and a building that invented AstroTurf and changed American sports probably qualifies. There may be a third path nobody has found yet, but here's the question I want to leave you with. Not just what you would do with the Astrodome, but what you think a city owes to the buildings that made it what it is. Does a place have an obligation to its own history, or does history only matter until it becomes too expensive? Leave your answer in the comments. I will read every single one. Subscribe for more superstructures investigations.